Hello, welcome back to 1001 Nights of Reading the World. I'm Mike. Today I would like to discuss three collections of tales from three different countries, as well as a few others that I decided would be best combined in other videos, or, I'm going to be mentioning a few other books, so stay tuned for that. With these, I read Croatian Tales of Long Ago for Croatia, obviously, by Ivana Brlić-Mažuranic is my best attempt at the author's pronunciation, or compiler, I suppose. And then we have Mother's Beloved Stories from Laos by Outhine Bounyavong. And this is, rather than folk tales, I thought this was going to be folk tales, so that's why I read it with these books. It's actually more of like slice of life vignettes of the late 1980s in Laos, which is the time period, I guess, that this author was able to return to their country after war and political upheaval. And then told by Starlight and Chad from Chad, which I did read and do a video on last year at some point. I can't even remember when. I decided to hide that video and just kind of make this. It was 26 minutes. I was reading stories straight out of it, pretty much, and I feel like it's more useful if I just combine it into this video and just talk about it for a few minutes. So let me start. Let me start with, I guess, in my opinion, the star of the show. Not to say that the other books are bad or anything. They're actually quite good. But Croatian Tales of Long Ago was really, I think, the most captivating out of all three of these. This was written in the early 20th century. It is Myths, Legend, and Folk Stories of Croatia. There are like 6 or 7 tales in here. And some really interesting stuff, because it's like it does have kind of some of your typical European folktale tropes, but it also kind of inverts some of them, and there's some unexpected things in it. And really, as I was reading through it, I didn't really feel like any of these stories were straight up predictable, or like I was actually quite engaged in all of them. So there's really not a bad story in here, and I guess just looking at some of the examples, some of the generalizations I can make is that a lot of the stories are very focused on the morality of like respect for elders. Respect for elders is a really big thing that comes in this story, and the wisdom of elders, of course, who would be the ones telling these folk tales to the young people, I imagine. Like the first story, How Quest Sought the Truth, is about kind of 3 sons, one of which is, all 3 of which have their difficulties in respecting their father, and it's sort of a tragic story. But this is another thing, that none of them are very straightforward. Almost every story will start with a scenario, go to a completely different scenario, which then ties back in a convoluted way to that original, kind of the original first scenario of the story. So none of them are really direct routes to their moral. And also some wonderful images in here. That's one thing I think in these folktale books can often make or break them for me, like make them interesting or not. I do think the visual element is important to me, because I just brought this out just to show an example. When scary stories to tell in the dark, what a lot of young United Statesian children grow up with. You have these these illustrations in black and white. It's a pretty old book with stories that are really old. And most of them are in the public domain. So you have these really interesting illustrations to accompany kind of these. They're marketed as scary stories, but a lot of them are just kind of folk legends, and some of them are pretty actually creepy. But then you have this Croatian Tales of Long Ago really kind of struck a similar chord with me. You also have like underwater adventures to kingdoms under the sea. You have. You just the the old crone character, but she's actually not so bad of a character at first, but then is kind of a bad character. I don't know. There's just all these interesting twists and turns, and I don't want to give away the whole thing. If you like folktales, I wholeheartedly recommend this one as being one of the most interesting folktale collections I've ever read. And this is, it's getting difficult because as I read more and start to understand more and reflect more on, videos I've already made and things I've already said, my desire to actually say a lot, just say any old thing about these books kind of goes down. I don't, like, my desire to talk about the books actually lessens without sort of preparation or really thinking about what it is I want to get across. But I think that can be best saved as we're nearing the end of the project to continue with this sort of improvised, and we're already almost at the end, so it's like might as well keep going. Told by Starlight and Chad was one of those early videos that it was 25 minutes long and it could have been 6 minutes. So I'm just going to say that this is a decent collection of folktales, a bit hit and miss. Some of them had really, after reading them, I'm like, really, what was the moral of that, Or like there's some mixed messaging, but at the same time they were very interesting. And thinking about folktales as metaphors for different things reminded me of something Italo Calvino says in 6 Memos for the Next Millennium, when he is using Perseus' story and wielding Medusa's head kind of as a weapon and going to different places as a metaphor for his essay on lightness. And he says here, I am immediately tempted to find in this myth an allegory of the relationship between the poet and the world, a lesson about how to write. But I know that every interpretation of a myth impoverishes and suffocates it. With myths, it's better not to rush things, better to let them settle in memory, pausing to consider their details, to ponder them without moving beyond the language of their images. The lesson we can draw from a myth lies within the literality of its story, not in what we add to it from without. I don't completely understand what he's saying there, but I find it so captivating, and that it relates to now Told by Starlight and Chad, because there are 2 stories in particular, I would even say one in particular from this book, and it's one of the shortest, that has stayed in my memory from the over a year ago when I read it. And it is of a girl a servant girl who's treated horribly, beaten and everything. She loses the desire to live, and she runs away into this forest where she meets terrifying monster after terrifying monster, and she just doesn't care because she wants to die. And then she comes upon this really, like, almost described as like a sort of, I don't know, abyssal horror type of thing, or like a cosmic horror type of entity, and she just says she doesn't want to live, and this entity actually tells her that her time will come anyway, so she might as well go back to live her life, or something to that effect, and that a good life is to be found in being virtuous. So this girl goes back to this situation where she was being beaten and is basically a servant, to just try to make the best of it and live. And that is just, that stayed in my head and is just such a bizarre thing, because my immediate reaction to that is like, it sounds like the message of this story is that just accept your lot in life, and no matter how bad it is, and just, do what you're told kind of thing. But then this whole, I don't know, that's obviously, and that's, I think, what Italo Calvino is kind of saying by any interpretation of a myth or a folktale, kind of actually streamlines, or it distills and focuses in something that is not meant to be rationalized in that way into just a little sort of meaning or moral or message, and that actually cheapens the message of the actual metaphor that the folktale is. So I think that's what he's trying to say. That wasn't the best expressed. So let me move on. There is some good stuff in here, by the way. Other great stories. Again, this is if you really like folktales, this is actually one of the more interesting books of quite a few of folktales that I've read. So, Mother's Beloved, Stories from Laos. Again, this turned out to be more of a collection of stories. I thought it was going to be like folk tales and things, but I was pleasantly surprised actually with how wonderful it is. And once again, from Southeast Asia and East Asia, I've chosen a book unintentionally that does slice of life better than anything I've read in the Western canon, to just use a silly phrase. But this book, I think on the back it says it really well. Rather than writing through an ideological lens, Outhine focuses on the passions and foibles of ordinary people. And in this, it says, their good luck, disappointments, and plain but poignant conversations reveal the subtle textures of Lao culture. And I think that's absolute texture here is a great word. You get these strange... the title of the story is explained almost right away, where there's an encounter in which the narrator... It is, I believe, just a nonfiction sort of memoir type of book told in vignettes that could be, fiction. It's almost like that sort of... what do we call that? I don't know what you call that, but just sort of memoirs told as very short stories that could be read as fiction. But it's like the right away we get this reflection on how there's a hungry mother who, it's like this narrator reflects on his own mother and how there's a responsibility for everybody to feed the child that's within a mother's womb. It's like give a mother food, basically, if she asks for it or if she asks for something, because it's all of our responsibility to make this world a place that a new person can come into a little bit more comfortable, a little bit better. It's kind of doing your part for the future generation. I don't know why that was so hard for me to put into words, but I'm keeping it, not editing it out. So the juxtapositions in this book are really what bring out that texture. There's one scene I remember where he's at a women's basketball game and admiring, basically, looking at the women's legs and checking out the basketball players, but then it's juxtaposed with him like buying something from a vendor, a Coke from a vendor or something, and that's like all of his money, and he's thinking about, now what am I going to do with only 20 cents in my pocket or something like that, and it's just sort of this another juxtaposition as we get later on is this beautiful landscape of the sea, and then he's also observing how there's like trash in the streets and sort of this juxtaposition between modernity, development, and nature kind of comes out, but it's all told through very just everyday, ordinary scenarios. Everything is understated up to the end of the book when, in a lot of books what you would get is, the trying to be really dramatic. The mother passes away and the characters are like sad and are at their funeral maybe. That's how like a fiction book would probably dramatize this sort of collection of stories and have this dramatic arc, right? Well, in this one, his mother simply goes away to take care of their grandfather and he misses her. Just because she's like physically away. But I think also if you were to read this book in another way, there's a metaphor here between the narrator's mother and nature, and there's also kind of a reflection in parts of the book about how people are hunting birds and there seem to be less birds in the sky, but then when the logging company comes in, then the birds disappear completely. And And yeah, so it's tempting, at least for me, thinking in a symbolic way, to try to connect Mother's Beloved, the idea of not only the narrator's actual mother that he's talking about here, but like the Mother Earth, because there really is a lot of ecological concerns that emerge, especially toward the second half. It's a very short book all the way. All of these books are very, very short. Like, I think all of them are less than 120 actual pages. And this Mother's Beloved is actually shorter even than it looks because it is bilingual. It has Lao text on one side. I believe it's Lao text. I didn't... oh yeah, it's the Lao originals, yep. And English on the other, so, you know, it's quite a short book. And there's also a lot of context given in the beginning that background political context that I didn't read. But yeah, that's another main theme, I think, of the story, is how a country is left traumatized by war and political upheaval without ever really directly talking about that. And then, of course, modernization and nature, the struggle of nature, are all mixed into that as well. So going forward, there were two other books. Well, there's one other book that I read and another that I started. Reynard the Fox. This was actually a Flemish folk tale that's very old, like dating at least back to the medieval period. And I was told there is also better, more accurate translations than this one. And it was quite interesting, but I actually want to discuss this one alongside the novel that I'm going to eventually be reading for Belgium, because there's a strong connection between this one and the Belgian novel that I'm going to be reading. So this was going to be just kind of my shoe-in for Luxembourg, the tiny country, next to Belgium. And I don't know, I didn't really have anything else for Luxembourg, even though I don't think this particular edition has anything to do with it specifically. I don't think like the translators from there or anything. It doesn't matter. It's just a folktale that's from that region. The countries don't really matter that much. I'm just having fun coloring off things on a map. But like I said, I'm going to discuss Reynard the Fox in a future video alongside that other one, but definitely one worth checking out if you're interested. Just look some things up about that. I know there's at least one other video on YouTube about Reynard the Fox that's really quite good, and talks about how it's kind of the origin of a lot of our animal stereotypes. So it's a parable told through animals, and like the clever, tricky fox, of course, and then like the big bad wolf, and sort of how badgers are often shown in modern examples, things like Redwall or different, or Robin, the Disney movie Robin Hood. A lot of those characters just come straight from Reynard the Fox, but Reynard the Fox is a lot more gritty than, for lack of a better word, than those examples that I gave. Nobody's really a good guy, is what I'm saying, and Reynard the Fox is definitely not a good guy. But if you look at some authors and their characters, sometimes goodness is spoken of as a bourgeois trait anyway. So when you're a medieval peasant, you do whatever you have to do to trick the royalty and the lords who are exploiting you. And so the last one I wanted to mention was Bearslayer for Latvia. I am deciding whether I want to do a full video on this one. It is really good and really interesting. It's translated into English from unrhymed Latvian verse, and I believe you can find this for free online. I just decided to buy this physical version just because I like reading physical, and thought it would be good to support this I guess rather underappreciated epic, because it's an old epic tale of Latvia, of a region that isn't, and it's not part of like the English canon, like Beowulf, and it's not necessarily connected to the Germanic tales, from what I can tell. It's really its own kind of history. The language isn't working today, but yeah, like that region of Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania is, and even Finland is all kind of, from what I understand, they have their own sort of traditions of stories and folk tales and things that is often overlooked just because it's kind of a niche, I guess, region of study. But anyway. Yeah, we'll hopefully talk about this more in depth in the future, either combined into another video or on its own, depending what I feel is right. So that's all I got today. Just getting through a few more of these books that I have collected for my Read Around the World project, and hopefully creating something useful here for those of you who like international literature. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.